Assalamu alaikum. In this video lecture, we will be discussing about clauses. So let's start. First of all, you need to know what is clause. A clause is a group of the words that includes a subject and a verb. For example, the dog barks when the postman arrives. This sentence has two clauses. Number one is the dog barks, and number two is when the postman arrives. This sentence again, as I told, has two clauses. So in the first one, the dog is basically the subject and verb is basically barks. And in second one, the subject is postman and verb is arrives. Then you need to know the difference between the dependent as well as the independent clauses. For this, you need to know that the clause which can stand alone in a sentence is an independent clause. For example, if I say the dog barks, so it means that it can stand independent, therefore it is an independent clause. Again, the clause which cannot stand alone as a sentence is the dependent clause. In the first example we had, when the postman arrives is basically cannot stand alone, therefore it is a dependent clause. All the cars stop when they see a red flag. Again, there are two clauses. Clause 1 is all the cars stop, and the subject of this clause is all the cars, and the verb is stop. It can be independent clause. The main clause in any sentence is the independent clause. And the clause 2 is when they see a red flag. The subject of this clause is they, and the verb is basically see. So they is also present and see is also present, and it is an dependent clause because it cannot stand independent. And also this clause is functioning like an adverb. Compare it with the independent clauses. This proves that when they see a red flag is functioning as adverb. So basically when we talk about the types of clauses, so the types of clauses includes dependent clause, independent clause. We have discussed the dependent as well as independent clauses in detail. Now we are going to talk about the types of the dependent clauses. This includes noun clause, adverb clause, and relative clause. Although you've got a complete understanding about the independent clause, there is again a couple of things you need to revise. First of all, an independent clause can stand alone and as a complete sentence. For example, John eats eggs, and this independent clause is literally a sentence because it can stand alone. And then there's the dependent clause. A dependent clause is the one which cannot stand alone. For example, John ate food which I made last night. In the sentence which I made last night cannot stand alone, therefore it is a dependent clause. A dependent clause functions like an adjective, an adverb, or a noun. We will see this thing in detail. This means that there are three types of the dependent clauses, which includes nouns, adverbials, and relative clauses. A relative clause is the clause functioning as an adjective, and this is also called as an adjective clause. In order to understand this thing, just see this example that John eats eggs that his chicken lay. Again, here the dependent clause, that is chicken lay, includes his chicken, which is more or less a subject of the dependent clause, and lay, which is the verb of the dependent clause. Therefore, it is acting as an adjective clause or a relative clause. Now we have the adverbial clause. An adverbial clause is a clause functioning like an adverb. For example, John eats eggs when his chickens lay them. Again, now over here you can see that like in order to understand this thing, you can compare it with John eats eggs regularly. Again, जो है वो regularly आपको नजर आ रहा है कि वो adverb है, तो आपको यहाँ पे समझ आ रहा है कि किस तरह से which is chicken lay them जो है ना adverb के तौर पर act कर रहा है. Then there is a noun clause. A noun clause is a clause functioning like a noun. For example, John eats what his chicken lay, and you can compare it with John eats eggs. Again, you can eggs की जगह यहाँ पर आपने what his chickens lay use किया हुआ है. The last thing which you need to know is this proof that clause is functioning as a noun. Usually the noun clause is basically the part of the independent clause. This is all for today. Thank you so much.